Hi, I'm Jotham. Let's get your house under contract. So we found the house for you. Let's get it. I'll write the offer and you review. Right now, let's go what's in a contract piece by piece. That'll take about 10 minutes to go through. If you'd rather watch little 90-second micro steps, look down below at the 7 videos that we have and watch at your own pace. So the first piece is the amount that you're offering. If the seller only looks at one thing in your offer, it's this number. We already know what they're asking, but what's it actually worth? Anybody can slap a house on a number and say it's for sale, so I'll research the market and tell you. We also care about what an appraiser is likely going to think the house is worth too, because when you are borrowing money from the bank, they want an appraiser's opinion. What he does is look at houses that are comparable, that have already sold in the area. So, if it's possible to get your house for less, I absolutely will. I'm going to get you that house at the best price possible. But the important part of that phrase is get you the house at the best price possible. It has to be something the seller will say yes to. And if there's any opening to negotiate for that, where we have a strength and the seller doesn't, then I will get you a lower price. If it's a fair price and you agree, everything is always smoother when both parties quickly agree on a price and away we go. But if there's a lot of competition, the house might sell for more than the list price, right? Competition is always good for a seller in an open market. So I'm going to suggest what it takes based on my experience, and I'm usually right, but it's not my offer. Ultimately, I make a suggestion and you decide. I'll put whatever number you say in there. The second piece of the contract is going to be the amount of closing costs we're asking the seller to contribute. So if they only look at one thing, it's the amount offering, but if they look at two, it's this piece here. Because the amount you're asking the seller to contribute means they make less net profit overall. So we can ask the seller to pay for all of it, or you can pay for all of it, or we can meet anywhere in between. It just depends that when you ask the seller to pay for it, your offer's not as strong, and depending on how competitive it is, it's just important for you to know how strong your offer is going to look and the net amount the seller will make minus, once we take away what we're asking them to contribute toward closing costs. So what are closing costs? It's about 3% of the price of the home, and it's some fees to make the transaction happen. 1% is bank loan origination fees. Another percent is title search, title insurance, and attorney fees, the closing attorney where the transaction takes place. Title, again, is making sure the seller really owns the house, because they're going to get money wired to them at the end, and we want to make sure they were the owner and no one else has a claim against your new house. Lastly, another 1% is called prepaids. You're prepaying your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes for a year. The bank that has your mortgage will hold that money in an escrow account and pay that for you. Your mortgage always includes your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes, because they will the bank makes sure that they're not going to let you miss those payments. It's too important. So if you have just enough money for your down payment, then we're going to get you a house. But if it's a highly competitive one, we may not, because we'll be asking the seller to pay all of closing costs. So let's talk, balance your needs for cash with the likelihood of success in making an offer and getting them to accept. The third piece is going to be the closing date. Okay, pretty simple. What day do you want to buy? Right now we're picking a specific date that you are going to close on the house. So why is that important? Well, before then, everything the bank needs in order to give you the loan, right, all the documentation that they want from you needs to be done before then. All the cash that you need to bring for the sale needs to be ready by then. You have to be ready to take possession, right? Start taking care and paying the mortgage on the house starting that day. And lastly, the seller has to agree. it's still the seller's house until closing day, and they have to agree to the date that you put in there too. So typically it's 1 month from the day of the offer, okay? It can be a lot faster, right? If the house is empty and you're paying in all cash, well, we can close in less than a week. If the seller needs to move out, or your financing is going to take extra long, or there's another reason why you want to move in later, well, we could offer 45 days, and anything that two parties agree to is fine. Typically, a seller is ready to sell sooner rather than later, and they don't very often accept offers that would be much longer than a month. So what date do you want to move in? We're going to put that in the offer. Okay, let's talk about the other pieces of the contract. Earnest money, right? Typically it's 1%, but it could be offering any amount that you want. Earnest money is saying that your offer is in earnest. Okay? It's not an extra fee, but it's an amount you need to put down right after the seller accepts your offer. You're going to put down an amount that shows your offer is serious, because now their house is off the market. They can't sell it to anybody else. So that 1% of the value of the home rolls into your down payment on closing day. So it's nothing extra. You just pay your earnest money, you write that check early, and you can add that into your closing, into your down payment on closing day. But the way it protects the seller is, if you just don't show up the day before closing and their house was off the market for a month, well, then they get to keep that money. That's what protects them from someone messing with them. But you have a time to, I'll always tell you when we're coming up against a date where you wouldn't get your earnest money back, such as the inspection period. So that's the next piece, is the due diligence or inspection period. All right, we can put in any number of days there that both parties can agree on. I typically start with 10, try and get you a week and a few days to inspect the house and make sure that's really the one that you want. If you have an inspection and it turns out there is a sinkhole underneath the house, then we say we're out. We terminate the contract and you get your earnest money back. So the due diligence time period is your time to inspect the house, send in a licensed home inspector, and check out anything else. Do your due diligence of, is this really the house that you want to close on? Next is selecting a closing attorney. All right, I can suggest one of several that I work with a lot. The seller sometimes says they'll only accept offers from a certain closing attorney, or you may know one, in which case we can put in whatever you like there. Then there's the financing contingency and the appraisal contingency. They're going to put a date, a number of days that you have to finalize your financing. Okay, so I try to get 3 weeks usually. So, if you lose your job the day before closing, it's not great, okay? Because that would have been beyond your financing contingency, and that earnest money would again then be at risk. Same with the appraisal. We have a certain amount of time to get the appraisal done. Your offer is contingent on the appraisal. If the house doesn't appraise, well, then you can either they can lower the house price to the appraisal amount and you're still under contract, or if they don't, you can take your earnest money and walk away. You can also make up the difference. The bank won't loan you more than the house appraises for, but if you have to have this house and you're willing to pay more than what it appraised for, you can pay the difference between what the bank will loan you and what the actual appraisal amount was. There's also a seller's disclosure. Okay? Sellers are legally obligated to tell you any known defects about the house. And so that's what that form is, several pages of telling you everything that they know for sure about the house. And lastly is the community association disclosure. Right? That tells you if there's an HOA or not. And if there is, well, what are the dues? So just like the county has the legal right to collect property taxes from you, an HOA has the legal right to collect that money, your annual dues from you. So here's where the seller tells you exactly what those fees are. Now I'm going to go over some other forms to sign as we make the offer. right? And these are really just, this is not part of the offer, but this is between you and me as your agent. One says that I represent you, right? I can't make an offer without officially being your agent who represents you legally in the transaction. I'll also have an affiliated business disclosure. And that tells you the lenders, the home inspectors, the closing attorneys that I might suggest to you. You don't have to use them. They're just people that I work with regularly, and it's acknowledging you don't have to choose these people. I recommend them, simply trying to provide a solution. And lastly is wire fraud. Look out for wire fraud. Now, this doesn't happen that often. I don't want to scare you too much, but when it does happen, it costs people a lot of money. So it's very important, which is that when it comes to wiring your down payment to the closing attorney's office, right, a few days before closing or the day before closing or sometimes just the morning of closing, you're going to wire money out of your checking account into the closing attorney's account, and we're using that money for closing. Well, one of the scams that's out there in an imperfect world is just people sending an email that says, hey, here's where you should wire your money. Don't follow those instructions. Only follow the wiring instructions from the closing attorney. So this is just a form saying I told you that, and even I won't email you the wiring instructions. They will come directly from the closing attorney. That's it. Lastly is just signing the form. It's all digital. We can review everything verbally. You can read it all on your phone or email and tap to officially sign. And once you do, I'll present that to the seller. So you've made an offer, right? We wrote an offer together. You signed it. We presented it to the seller. Now, if they accept, you win and you're in. Okay? If the sellers like it, we're good to go. Sometimes sellers are ready. They get your offer, they love it, they sign it right away, and we're under contract by that night. Sometimes the seller is slow, right? They might not be as motivated as we thought they were, or they might be getting a lot of offers. When it's competitive, they may want to work offers against each other or wait to see what the highest one that they get is. So if there's a period of negotiation, that's great. I dominate at negotiation. But once we present the offer, we will hear back from the seller, sometimes promptly and sometimes a day or two later. All right. If you don't win, all right, let's get you that house, get you under contract, and begin that process of getting toward closing day. But if they accept another offer, then we're back to a previous step of looking again and finding a new winner to make that offer. Click the button at New House Tracker. Let's meet and get you from questions to keys.